Prepare yourself for a tale of power, passion, and betrayal that will grip you from the very first breath. Picture a high-stakes courtroom in Seattle's prestigious King County Courthouse, crowded with press and bystanders alike, all transfixed by the unfolding drama of a millionaire, his pregnant wife, and the cunning mistress who vows to take everything. The mistress smirks, confident she's about to secure her lavish fortune and new life, until the wife unveils a piece of evidence so explosive it sends shockwaves through the courtroom. If you think you've seen everything, think again. The truth is only beginning to unravel. In the heart of Seattle's upscale Medina neighborhood, there stood an expansive estate that boasted panoramic views of Lake Washington. Built from polished marble, tempered glass, and imported Italian stone, it was the kind of mansion you might spot in architectural magazines, a glimmering testament to wealth, ambition, and status. This estate belonged to Gregory "Greg" Brantley, a real estate mogul reputed for his shrewd eye and relentless drive. Locals knew him as one of the biggest property developers across Washington state, with business partners stretching as far as Hong Kong, Dubai, and London. Greg's climb to the pinnacle of success was legendary in local business circles. People swapped stories about how he had started out selling small commercial properties in unremarkable suburbs. They marveled at his transformation from a hustling broker into the chief executive of Brantley Properties, an empire worth tens of millions of dollars. Greg, with his stylish suits and persuasive charm, had become a fixture in Seattle high society. He hosted opulent charity galas, donated significant funds to political campaigns, and rubbed elbows with prominent city officials. Behind this dazzling exterior was Greg's personal life, seemingly stable but prone to the same human flaws and entanglements that money and influence can't fully erase. He was married to Aurora Davenport Brantley, a high-profile attorney at Dunham & Davenport, a well-known firm with offices in New York, San Francisco, and Seattle. Aurora was the daughter of the late Senator Donald Davenport, which placed her among Seattle's aristocracy. She was admired for her intelligence, regal beauty, and philanthropic involvement. The couple's wedding, rumored to have cost over $1 million, had been a highlight of Seattle's social calendar 5 years earlier. Aurora wore a custom-made Vera Wang gown, and local newspapers ran front-page stories comparing their union to an American fairy tale. It was a marriage that appeared unstoppable, a union of power and lineage combining Greg's modern business world with Aurora's distinguished political heritage. But no fairy tale remains perfect once reality sets in. Beneath the glimmering facade, tensions brewed. Greg's travels were becoming frequent and longer. Aurora was often tied up in high-stakes corporate cases. Their estate, though magnificent, grew empty by the day, a silent fortress of unspoken anxiety. They each rationalized that their busy schedules were necessary for their future. Managing generational wealth takes time. In truth, they drifted further apart. Though Aurora was pregnant with their first child, the shared excitement was overshadowed by rumors. Greg had been seen at private dinners and business events with another woman. Gossip spread like wildfire among the city's elite. The mistress in question was a sharp-witted PR consultant named Esmeralda Esme Von Cleef. A striking presence with a runway model's posture, Esme had risen quickly in the publicity world and was rumored to be building an impressive client roster of wealthy men. People whispered that she had ways of entangling their hearts and finances alike. The news of Greg's suspected affair reached Aurora's ears through more than one channel: a stray text message from a friend, a hushed mention by her mother at a Sunday brunch. The hush became an echo, and Aurora's mind reeled with the betrayal. Her entire identity as a brilliant attorney and esteemed socialite seemed to teeter on an edge she never saw coming. By the time she confirmed the truth, anger roiled through her veins. She was carrying her husband's child, yet he was off cavorting with a cunning mistress. The injustice cut deep, especially given Aurora's unwavering devotion. But Aurora wasn't the kind of woman to weep helplessly in a corner. Raised by a senator father and shaped by fierce mentors at her law firm, she knew how to bide her time, gather evidence, and strike back methodically. All she needed was the right plan. Meanwhile, Esme Von Cleef, enamored with her new wealthy lifestyle, had no idea just how formidable her rival could be. Late one evening, after Greg had claimed he was in Portland on a business trip, Aurora sat in her quiet study with the lights turned low. She'd canceled her dinner plans to review documents from a private investigator she had quietly hired weeks earlier. Even though Aurora possessed an extensive network of legal contacts, she needed an investigator who operated with utmost discretion. She found one in Joanna Krislov, a former detective from the Seattle Police Department, known for her professionalism and loyalty. Joanna's findings arrived in a black folder stuffed with photographs and typed reports. Inside were pictures of Greg stepping out of a Rolls-Royce near a five-star boutique hotel in downtown Seattle. Another set of images showed him sharing intimate meals with Esme, deep in conversation. A final photograph captured them arm in arm by the hotel's side entrance. It was damning evidence. Aurora hadn't been hoping for Greg's innocence anymore. Her gut already warned her of the truth, but seeing the proof shook her. She gently touched her growing belly and felt a swirl of fury, betrayal, and a protectiveness that overshadowed the heartbreak. One might wonder why Aurora felt compelled to document Greg's affair so meticulously. After all, as a high-powered attorney, she knew Washington's laws around marital assets and divorces inside out. If she filed for divorce, she would have a legal advantage thanks to her father's legacy, her law firm's influence, and of course the images in her hand. It could be an airtight case for spousal misconduct. But Aurora was playing a longer, more elaborate game. She didn't just want revenge. She wanted to protect her unborn child from any upheaval. And if that meant facing off against Esme in court, Aurora planned to do so on her own terms. Late into the night, Aurora found herself reading through Joanna's transcripts of overheard conversations. Esme was apparently quite vocal about expecting a payoff from Greg. She had bragged to a friend about getting what she deserved from him, a phrase that left Aurora unsettled. What if Esme demanded more than hush money? What if she threatened Aurora's child's inheritance? The possibilities were endless and terrifying. Aurora closed the folder, her mind racing. Morning sickness had been plaguing her, so she felt an underlying sense of fatigue, yet she couldn't sleep. She texted Joanna, "Aurora, thank you, keep me posted if there's more." A moment later, her phone buzzed. Joanna, always. They've met tonight, too. We'll update tomorrow. Take care. Aurora set her phone aside and rested her hand once more on her stomach. The child moved a faint flutter as though offering her silent encouragement. That night, Aurora promised herself and her baby that she would fight back with everything she had. Esme Von Cleef had never sought to remain a mere fling or shadow in Greg Brantley's life. Born to a middle-class family in Spokane, she spent her youth yearning for the glamour she saw in glossy magazines. After college, she pivoted quickly into the high-stakes publicity world in Seattle. Working her way up, she discovered that real power wasn't just about appearances. It was about forging the right connections. She had a knack for mesmerizing wealthy men with a blend of intellectual charm and subtle manipulation. Her affair with Greg started innocently enough, or so she claimed. At a fundraiser for an art center, she managed to position herself near him, pitching her PR expertise. She recognized his boredom with the curated conversations at such charity events. She offered him an escape from the monotony, a breath of fresh air. Their conversation sparked quickly, and by the end of that night they had shared multiple glasses of expensive champagne while huddled in a quiet corner. Following that evening, Esme insinuated herself into Greg's professional life as well. She rebranded his personal image online, updated press releases that highlighted his philanthropic gestures, and scheduled exclusive interviews with business publications. She created a polished persona for Greg, painting him not just as a wealthy developer but also a visionary with a heart. Her role became indispensable, and soon, personal dinners replaced formal lunches. Their emotional bond deepened, or so she believed. The lines between personal and professional blurred, then disappeared entirely. For Esme, this affair was not some passing fling. She'd tasted a lifestyle filled with private jets, high-end restaurants, designer clothing, and unlimited spending. The power she felt in these circles was intoxicating. She started walking with a new kind of confidence, chin-up, eyes steady, a swagger that said she was done with life on the sidelines. Rumors reached her that Aurora was pregnant, but Esme dismissed the wife as an afterthought. She believed she had Greg's heart entirely. Or if not his heart, then certainly his wallet. She wanted more the recognition of being by his side openly. Perhaps she even daydreamed about a ring. In private conversations, Esme boasted to close acquaintances that Greg might leave Aurora eventually. "I know how to keep him hooked," she would say, swirling a glass of red wine. "She can't compete with me, not in business, and certainly not in love." Few dared to voice the obvious. Aurora Davenport Brantley was not just a socialite, she was a formidable attorney with tremendous influence. But Esme's self-assurance was unwavering. She believed Aurora had too much pride to engage in a messy catfight. She assumed Aurora would quietly retreat once she realized Greg had emotionally moved on. If only Esme had known the shadowy forces at work. If only she had anticipated how a scorned wife, especially a pregnant one, might respond. She might have been more careful. But arrogance is a powerful blindfold. While Aurora was skillfully gathering her evidence, Greg was in the throes of moral conflict. He was not inherently evil. He was simply reckless, opportunistic, and at times driven by lust. He had genuinely cared for Aurora once and perhaps still did in his own complicated way. But over the years, their relationship had warped under professional strain and emotional neglect. Aurora's pregnancy added another layer of guilt. Deep down, Greg wanted to be a good father. He could envision fishing trips with his son or father-daughter dances if it was a girl. But Esme's pull was magnetic. She offered him uncritical admiration and excitement that felt missing at home. She had become his confidant, the person he turned to after stressful board meetings or arguments with city regulators. In his twisted logic, he convinced himself he deserved this slice of happiness, ignoring the moral cost. And so he found himself in the precarious position of juggling a pregnant wife and a lover whose ambitions seemed to grow by the day. Eventually, Aurora confronted him not with accusations, but with a calm that set him on edge. One evening, she interrupted his dinner to say, "We need to talk." Greg's stomach clenched with guilt. In the softly lit dining room, Aurora set aside her fork and eyed him with the controlled intensity she often displayed in a courtroom. "I know about Esmeralda von Cleef," she said, her voice icily steady. Greg's immediate reaction was a mumbled denial, but Aurora's gaze left no room for delusions. Something about her posture, straight-back, folded hands, reminded him of the times he'd seen her cross-examine a witness. It chilled him to the bone. "Greg," she continued, her voice unwavering, "I want to protect our child from scandal, so I'm giving you a chance to end things. Stop seeing her. We can discuss how to salvage our marriage if you genuinely want that. Otherwise—" She paused, letting the silence speak volumes. "Otherwise?" what he asked quietly. "You know I have the legal resources to fight a battle you won't win," she said. "I'm not threatening you. I'm offering you an out, a graceful one." He could see it clearly, a future of protracted divorce proceedings, public humiliation, and irreparable damage to his reputation. Aurora still looked beautiful, her face framed by the warm glow of the chandelier. The subtle curve of her belly reminded him of everything that was at stake. Was his fling worth destroying it all? Yet even in that moment of clarity he found himself hesitating. So strong was Esme's hold that he mumbled something about needing time to think. Aurora nodded stiffly, her heart pounding with both fury and heartbreak. She recognized that Greg was too tangled up to act decisively. That night Greg slept in the guest room. Aurora lay awake in the master bedroom, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She realized she was still willing to fight for the relationship, if only for her child's future, but only on her terms. And if Greg chose wrongly, she would eviscerate both him and Esme in court. As the days passed, Aurora's belly continued to grow along with her resolve. She began fortifying her case in ways that even Greg didn't anticipate. She had phone records, restaurant bills, and quietly obtained credit card statements indicating lavish gifts Greg had purchased. Over dinner with her most trusted friend, Dr. Helena Mansour, an esteemed psychiatrist at the University of Washington Medical Center, Aurora confessed her mounting anxiety. "I've always solved problems by applying logic," Aurora said, swirling her glass of water. "But this is different. It's personal, and I'm pregnant. I can't just be the cold attorney here." Helena gave a sympathetic nod. You're right that it's personal, but you have every right to protect yourself and your baby. The truth is, Esme is a threat to your marriage and your future financial security. Do what you must, but don't let it corrode your emotional health." Aurora nodded, taking comfort in Helena's words. She continued meeting Joanna Krislov, the private investigator, at discreet locations, a cafe in Lower Queen Anne, a bench at Volunteer Park, exchanging info in a manner reminiscent of clandestine spy movies. By this stage, Aurora had not only photographs but also voice recordings. Esme, it turned out, had been less careful with her big talk than she should have been. The investigator had managed to capture bits of conversation, Esme bragging she was going to pressure Greg to hand over a prime waterfront property in Kirkland. The entire situation was spiraling. Things escalated further when Esme inadvertently learned Aurora was forging a private investigation. One of Esme's acquaintances at a PR firm recognized Joanna and connected the dots. Esme realized with horror that Aurora wasn't the type to suffer in silence. No, Aurora was building a fortress of evidence, ready to strike the moment she was sure to deliver a final blow. Esme responded by doubling down. She began documenting every kind gesture Greg made, every expensive dinner, every piece of jewelry. She saved text messages and multiple phone backups, capturing Greg's sweet nothings and confessions of dissatisfaction in his marriage. If Aurora wanted a war, Esme was preparing for it. Two cunning minds set the stage for a battle that overshadowed Greg's daily life. Greg himself was sinking deeper into despair. Caught between Aurora's ultimatum and Esme's relentless demands, he felt suffocated. Even business meetings grew tense. Employees whispered about his mood swings, his abrupt bursts of anger, or abrupt silence. Partners at Brantley Properties avoided direct confrontation, but they worried about the firm's stability if a massive scandal broke. One night, Greg tried to break it off with Esme in the lounge of a posh hotel in downtown Seattle. He explained that Aurora knew everything and threatened to ruin them financially. Esme refused to take it quietly. She hissed that she had enough evidence to drag Greg's reputation through the mud if he tried to dump her, speaking loudly enough that a few bystanders curiously glanced over. Seeing no immediate way out, Greg backpedaled again. He left that meeting even more entangled, wondering how his life had spiraled to this point. Meanwhile, Aurora continued her quiet preparation like a seasoned warrior bracing for the ultimate conflict. Little did any of them realize just how soon that conflict would explode, and in a public arena none of them had truly anticipated. Seattle's elite social circle, which Aurora and Greg had once cultivated so carefully, began to gossip in hushed but relentless tones. The exclusive dinners, galas, and charity auctions saw whispers intensify. "Did you hear about Greg Brantley's latest fiasco? Aurora might have a smoking gun." Rumors thrived in that environment. Rich donors and society mavens watched the Brantleys' downfall with vulture-like fascination. It wasn't only the socialites who were intrigued. Local tabloids occasionally featured salacious hints about Greg's private life. The press, hungry for a real scandal, tried to confirm the rumors. An investigative reporter named Elizabeth Liz Chan from the Seattle Tribune managed to interview Esme privately. Esme, flush with wine and overconfidence, let slip that she expected her share soon. Liz pressed her gently. Though Esme didn't give explicit details, her words were enough for a half-page rumor-laden article with the headline, "Mogul Greg Brantley's alleged mistress speaks, I'm getting what I deserve." Aurora read the article at her law office the following morning. She felt equal parts humiliated and gratified. The public exposure worsened Greg's position. At the same time, it steeled Aurora's determination. Soon, she coordinated a quiet meeting with her father's old friend, William Parker, a retired judge who still had influence at King County Superior Court. Over coffee, she inquired about legal strategies, specifically about potential defamation suits, breach of contract claims, and how to expedite spousal support hearings. "Be cautious," Judge Parker warned. "You want to ensure any move you make is well supported by documented proof. If you end up in a public court hearing, every piece of evidence will be scrutinized." Aurora nodded. "I'm ready for that. The bigger question is how to manage the fallout once all of this goes public. There's a child involved." Parker gave a sympathetic sigh. Remember, the courts typically favor the parent who can provide the most stable environment. If you proceed with a divorce and custody battle, you're in a strong position. Aurora's mind churned. A custody battle was never her first wish. She'd always hoped her child would grow up in a loving, intact family. But if Greg insisted on continuing with Esme, Aurora would have to protect her child above all else. Flush with a sense of power after the newspaper piece, Esme decided to up the ante. She wanted to rattle Aurora, force a confrontation that would push Greg to make a choice. One evening, Esme boldly showed up at the Brantley estate, having waited until she spotted Greg's black Range Rover in the driveway. She marched to the front door in a designer coat, rung the bell, and stared defiantly at the security camera. Inside, Aurora was sitting in the family room reading case files when the doorbell's chime echoed through the house. With Greg nowhere in sight, he was upstairs in his study, probably nursing a glass of scotch. Aurora marched to the door and peered out the side window. She froze upon recognizing Esme. Her first instinct was to ignore the woman, but something in Aurora's spirit refused to retreat on her own turf. She opened the heavy mahogany door. Esme smirked a smug tilt of her head. "Good evening, Mrs. Brantley." Aurora forced composure, though her heart pounded. "This is my home. You have no business here." "I think we both know my business is with Greg," Esme said, lifting her chin. "Where is he?" Aurora stepped forward, her eyes flaring with quiet fury. "He's unavailable. If you have something to say it to me." Unfazed, Esme gave a languid shrug. "I'm aware you're digging for evidence. I thought maybe we could come to some arrangement before you make this uglier than it needs to be." Aurora's lips tightened. "Arrangement? You're the one sleeping with a married man, blackmailing him for property. And you think you can just appear here on my doorstep and negotiate terms?" Esme rolled her eyes theatrically. "Why not? We all know how these stories go. He's going to end up with me, one day or another. Why drag everyone through a public scandal? I'm offering you a chance to save face. Let Greg go and we both can arrange a settlement that satisfies everyone." Fury propelled Aurora forward. She reached for the door handle, ready to slam it shut. But before she did, she spoke calmly, each word measured. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, Ms. Von Cleef. Leave now, or I'll have security escort you away." A cold silence followed, punctuated only by the distant hum of traffic. Finally, Esme gave a dismissive wave, turned on her heel, and strutted off. Aurora watched until the figure disappeared, her palms clammy from adrenaline. She then locked the door, her mind spinning with fresh resolve. Esme's audacity had sealed her fate. Upstairs, Greg heard the commotion and rushed down too late to prevent the confrontation. He found Aurora standing by the closed door, her breathing uneven. Without looking at him, she hissed, "Get rid of her, or I will." 2 days later, the storm clouds broke over the entire Brantley household. Aurora informed Greg she intended to file for a legal separation, attaching a scathing letter enumerating his affair and Esme's manipulations. She also indicated her willingness to take their dispute to court if necessary. Panic set in. Greg's business associates threatened to pull out of certain real estate ventures if his personal scandal spilled into the courts. The banks he worked with started calling more frequently, concerned about instability in Brantley properties. Greg begged Aurora for time, promising he'd cut ties with Esme. Aurora's response was chillingly direct. "Show me proof then. End it publicly, or we're done for good." Despite his entreaties, Aurora delivered official notice to Greg through her legal assistant. It was an undeniable statement the clock was ticking. Under pressure, Greg arranged a meeting at a private dining room in the Georgian, a historic upscale restaurant inside the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. He summoned Esme for what he promised would be a serious discussion. Over a candlelit table set with glimmering silverware, Greg explained that he couldn't jeopardize everything for her. He'd pay her a final settlement, an obscene amount of money, plus some stock options in a newly formed subsidiary, if she signed a non-disclosure agreement and walked away permanently. Esme listened, swirling her glass of champagne with tense, angry eyes. Her mind ran through multiple scenarios. If she refused, she risked losing the pot and facing Aurora's unstoppable legal aggression. If she accepted, she gained substantial money but lost her chance to become Greg's acknowledged partner. She might never again scale these heights of society. She stalled, claiming she needed time to think. A flash of irritation crossed Greg's face. He'd come to expect her acquiescence. Instead, Esme abruptly rose, leaning in so close that other diners couldn't hear her hushed words. "I'm not a whore. You can pay off Greg, but you'll regret forcing my hand." She stormed out of the restaurant, leaving Greg alone with his expensive wine, a swirl of dread tightening in his chest. 2 weeks later, the entire city's high society rumor mill was set ablaze by one piece of news. Aurora Davenport Brantley had filed a suit against Esmeralda Von Cleef, claiming defamation and intentional interference with a marital contract. The complaint's language was ferocious, referencing damages to Aurora's emotional well-being, the risk to her unborn child's stable environment, and even potential business losses. Such a lawsuit was unconventional but not unprecedented. Aurora leveraged every angle she could, painting Esme as a manipulator who publicly boasted of displacing a lawful spouse. While Washington state was no fault in divorces, Aurora found another creative legal strategy to drag Esme to court. The petition demanded a public hearing. Chaos gripped Esme. She scrambled to find a competent attorney, finally enlisting Jared Roth, a flashy litigator with a reputation for cunning tactics. The next day, tabloids breathlessly announced war in court. Pregnant heiress sues mistress over affair with millionaire. Seattle's talk radio shows and social media erupted with opinions, many condemning both Greg and Esme for their brazen affair. Others criticized Aurora for turning her personal turmoil into a very public lawsuit. The stage was set for what would become a spectacle. On top of that, Aurora's legal team filed a motion to freeze any extravagant financial transactions by Greg until the separation and property divisions were settled, citing concerns that he might try to hide assets or transfer them to Esme. Suddenly, Esme found her potential payday threatened. Her mind reeled. If Aurora succeeded, Esme might end up with nothing but negative headlines. Sensing the precariousness of the situation, she decided to strike first in the court of public opinion. Esme arranged an exclusive televised interview with a local news station where she tearfully claimed she never intended to harm Aurora, that Greg had confessed to being trapped in a loveless marriage, and that Aurora's pregnancy was an attempt to hold on to a failing relationship. She emphasized that she wasn't a gold digger but a woman who loved Greg deeply. Within minutes, social media lit up. Public sentiment swayed in multiple directions, with some calling Esme a liar and others saying Aurora, with her big law connections, was bullying a woman who'd simply fallen in love. But Aurora had anticipated Esme might try a media blitz. She kept her cool, publicly releasing a short statement via her law firm. Mrs. Aurora Davenport Brantley has chosen the legal process to address the situation. She trusts our judicial system to provide clarity and justice in this sensitive matter. At this time, she requests privacy for the health and well-being of her unborn child. The statement's restraint only fueled curiosity, leaving the tabloids to speculate wildly. Aurora, surrounded by her team of attorneys at Dunham and Davenport, meticulously refined her case. She planned to argue that Esme's intentional interference had caused emotional distress and threatened Aurora's family stability. The Washington legal code didn't explicitly encourage alienation of affection lawsuits, but Aurora's approach, defamation, interference in contract, and claims of malicious intent, was an inventive way around it. Most crucially, Aurora claimed Esme had lied in public interviews about Aurora's pregnancy being a trap, essentially tarnishing Aurora's character. The law firm's conference room buzzed with activity. Research associates pored over older precedents from other states. Aurora's father's connections got them the best local counsel. Judge Catherine Smith was assigned to the case, a strict but fair presence in King County Superior Court. Aurora had argued in front of Judge Smith before, and she knew that the judge detested public circus-like spectacles. Aurora was counting on that. Meanwhile, Greg's world was falling apart. His board of directors at Brantley Properties pressured him to settle this fiasco quietly before their stock prices were impacted. Yet both Aurora and Esme seemed determined to have their day in court. Greg was helplessly caught in the middle. He faced the possibility of losing substantial assets to Aurora in the separation, plus dealing with the meltdown of his professional image. His attorneys advised him to testify on Aurora's behalf, effectively supporting his wife's claim that Esme was the aggressor. But Greg worried about the fallout. Would Esme retaliate by revealing embarrassing details he'd texted or emailed? In a rare moment of reflection, Greg visited the old Catholic church in Capitol Hill, where his mother used to take him as a child. He sat in a pew, head in hands, trying to think of a path forward. The hushed calm of the church offered fleeting solace, but no real answers. He emerged more conflicted than ever. Esme, on the other hand, worked tirelessly with Jared Roth to discredit Aurora. They planned to argue that Aurora was weaponizing her legal knowledge to stifle Esme's First Amendment rights. They prepared to show that Greg was the true manipulator, feeding Esme false promises and hooking her into an affair. It was a legal and moral minefield guaranteed to blow up for someone. But who? When the trial date arrived, King County Superior Court was swarmed by reporters, camera crews, and onlookers hoping for a glimpse of the real-life soap opera. Court officials tried to maintain order, but the corridors echoed with excited chatter. Over by the courthouse steps sat a row of vans from major media outlets. Familiar local anchors and even a few national tabloid correspondents were present to cover the case live. Aurora, dressed in a tailored black maternity dress, arrived flanked by her legal team. She held her head high, her face impassive as cameras clicked wildly. At almost 8 months pregnant, the stress weighed on her, but her composure never cracked. Inside the courtroom, she took a seat at the plaintiff's table, nodding politely to the bailiff. Minutes later, Esme arrived in a sleek, pale pink suit, her own attorney close by. She seemed to revel in the attention-flashing, confident smiles. But behind her glamorous facade lay tension, visible in the stiffness of her shoulders. Greg entered last, looking more haggard than ever in a somber gray suit. Whispers swept the room. Everyone wondered, where would Greg stand in this battle? Judge Catherine Smith presided, her stern face making it clear that any media circus would be kept in check. With a rap of the gavel, the proceedings began. Aurora's lead counsel presented their opening statement, painting Esme as a calculating opportunist. They listed evidence, recorded conversations where Esme spoke openly about getting money from Greg, text messages where Esme called Aurora's unborn baby a bargaining chip, and numerous photographic exhibits of their clandestine meets. Aurora's attorney concluded by saying, "This defendant deliberately set out to destroy a marriage and defame a woman who is 6 months, now 8 months pregnant. We are here to rectify the harm done." Esme's attorney countered, proclaiming that Aurora's lawsuit was baseless and manipulative. He tried to shift blame onto Greg's shoulders, calling him the one who lured Esme into an affair by exaggerating his marital woes. He pointed to Aurora's powerful legal connections and declared this was an abuse of the judicial system. The tension was electric. During the first few days, witnesses took the stand. Friends, former employees, even an ex-boyfriend of Esme's who claimed she had a pattern of seducing older, wealthy men. Esme's attorney hammered back, highlighting how Aurora and her father's circle possessed the influence to orchestrate false narratives. The media devoured every twist. Greg's testimony was highly anticipated. When he was called to the stand, the entire room stilled. His voice wavering, he recounted how his marriage had grown distant and how Esme entered his life. He tried to paint himself as a misguided fool, manipulated by Esme's charms. But under cross-examination from Roth, Greg admitted he'd told Esme numerous times he would leave Aurora. That admission was a small but critical victory for Esme's defense. It painted Greg as a man who had deceived both women. The back-and-forth drama consumed the city. Evening news segments led with The Mistress versus the Heiress Day 3 in court. Public opinion ricocheted daily, reflecting the shifting tide of testimonies. Nobody could predict how Judge Smith might rule on Aurora's civil claims. As the trial's second week began, Aurora's lawyers teased a final piece of evidence they insisted would expose Esme's intentions beyond a doubt. Observers speculated it was more text messages, or perhaps a ledger of suspicious financial transactions. Instead, it turned out to be a short, secretly recorded video. On a crisp Monday morning, Aurora's side formally introduced the clip as Plaintiff's Exhibit F. The bailiff set up a large screen facing the judge in the gallery. Spectators leaned forward, hearts pounding with anticipation. Even Esme, usually composed, looked slightly nervous. The footage began with shaky angles indicating someone had used a hidden camera or phone. It was a conversation in a VIP lounge of a private airport hangar in Boeing Field. In the frame, Esme appeared seated on a plush leather sofa, her posture relaxed. Beside her was a friend later identified as her PR colleague Addison Pierce, who asked, "What if Greg's wife finds out everything?" Esme's response was crystal clear. She smirked into her wine glass and said, "Aurora's pregnant, so that's her ticket. But if she thinks she's winning anything in the end, she's wrong. I'll take Greg for every penny if he tries to back out. I have text pictures and I know how to manipulate him better than she ever could. She's too proud to take this fight public anyway." The camera caught Esme's confident grin as Addison pressed, "But what if she does go public?" Esme shrugged nonchalantly and replied, "Well, then I'll drag her name through the mud too. Trust me, Addison. I've done this before. I always come out on top, especially with men who think with their—" She let the sentence trail off with a suggestive laugh. The video ended abruptly. Silence blanketed the courtroom. Judge Smith's expression hardened. The footage revealed a cold, calculating Esme speaking in her own words, not coerced, not filtered. She had bragged about her manipulative approach, her readiness to blackmail, and her utter disdain for Aurora's pregnancy. Esme's face went pale. Her attorney immediately raised objections about the video's admissibility, questioning whether it was recorded legally. Aurora's counsel responded they had proof it was filmed at a public lounge area, which diminished any reasonable expectation of privacy. The judge, after reviewing the arguments, decided tentatively to allow it, noting the defense could revisit the legality in final motions. The atmosphere in the courtroom sizzled. Esme, typically smug, now looked cornered. The tabloids, already on high alert, scrambled to find a copy of the clip. Once the public saw it, and they surely would, the tide would shift decisively. No longer could Esme claim innocence or mere victimhood. She was revealed as someone who admitted on camera to extortion-like tactics and a willingness to drag Aurora publicly. For Aurora, who sat stoically while the video played, this was her moment of vindication. Her unborn child kicked gently, and she felt a wave of emotional release. She had delivered the masterstroke. Everything now hinged on how Judge Smith would weigh this explosive evidence. The day after the video's release, Esme arrived at the courthouse with dark sunglasses, her once proud posture slumped. Protesters had gathered outside, some carrying signs that read, "Homewrecker, go away," while others sported more neutral messages like "Everyone deserves a fair trial." News camera lights flashed harshly as she ducked into the building. Inside, her attorney, Jared Roth, attempted to limit the damage. He filed an emergency motion claiming the recording was entrapment and invasive surveillance, but the damage had been done. Public sympathy shifted dramatically. Talk shows lambasted Esme, calling her manipulative and heartless, especially given her disregard for Aurora's pregnancy. Sponsors cut ties with any brand deals she had. The fallout was swift. In cross-examination, Aurora's lawyer methodically dismantled Esme's claims of innocence. They played sections of the video again to refute her statements. Esme was forced to admit she had discussed extracting money from Greg, though she spun it as just venting out of frustration. Her composure cracked under pressure. She snapped at Aurora's attorney, prompting Judge Smith to warn her about contempt of court if she didn't maintain decorum. It was a slow, methodical unraveling of Esme's public image, once polished and poised, now undone in the bright glare of legal scrutiny. She ended a court session in tears one afternoon, prompting a recess. The tabloids' cameras captured her departure, a sobbing figure hustled into a black car by her lawyer. Meanwhile, Aurora quietly breathed relief. This was precisely the outcome she had envisioned. She wanted to confirm Esme as a malicious party in the eyes of the law, thereby strengthening her own claims and safeguarding her child's future. Greg, for his part, sat in the back row of the courtroom, staring at Esme's meltdown with a mixture of pity and guilt. He hadn't expected it to become this vicious, but he also recognized he had created the perfect storm. Faced with near-certain legal defeat, Esme's side scrambled to negotiate a settlement with Aurora's legal team. With the damning video, Aurora's claim for damages seemed unstoppable. Under advisement, Esme agreed to sign an official statement retracting her defamatory statements about Aurora. She also agreed to a six-figure settlement which essentially was a compensation for Aurora's emotional distress and reputational harm. Despite Esme's initial hope for hush money from Greg, she was now on the paying end, financed partly by the remains of her savings and with a loan from a private lender. It was humiliating. Judge Smith, in delivering her final remarks, criticized Esme's conduct as morally and legally questionable, though she also chastised Greg for entangling two women in a complex web. Officially, the judgment recognized Aurora's right to restitution. While the lawsuit was civil, not criminal, its outcome sent a clear message. Malicious interference and defamation in an extramarital affair could carry real consequences in a courtroom. Greg and Aurora now faced a crossroad in their marriage. Aurora's separation papers were still active. Over the course of the trial, Greg attempted to win back some measure of trust, claiming he'd cut Esme off permanently. But Aurora wasn't sure she could forgive him. The moral injury was severe. Their unborn child's due date loomed, adding urgency to any decision. Would they raise the baby together or separately? In the quiet aftermath, Aurora packed a few belongings and moved into her late father's townhouse in Capitol Hill. The Grand Medina estate felt too haunted by betrayal. She considered her options: finalize a divorce or attempt some form of reconciliation for the sake of the child. Many nights she stared at the sonogram photos, tears welling in her eyes. She wasn't sure which path led to true peace. A month had passed since the courtroom battle had ended, but the shockwaves still lingered in Seattle's high society. The gossip circles slowly turned their attention elsewhere, but for the Brantleys, the aftermath was deeply personal and ongoing. Esme Von Cleef had vanished from public view, her reputation in tatters. Whispers placed her in Los Angeles, trying to revive her career in public relations. But even in a city that thrived on reinvention, her name had become radioactive. None of her former clients returned her calls. Former friends left her unread. A few tabloids ran speculative pieces, The Mistress That Fell from Grace, accompanied by blurry paparazzi photos of her exiting low-tier events in oversized sunglasses. For someone who once strolled through elite fundraisers in Valentino gowns, it was a brutal fall. Back in Seattle, Greg was living a very different reality. Shaken by the legal disaster and public humiliation, he reached out to Aurora repeatedly through handwritten letters, voice messages, and long, carefully written emails. Gone were the excuses and deflections. He didn't beg for forgiveness, but he did something harder. He owned his mistakes. "I understand if you never trust me again," one message read. "But if there's any part of you that wants to rebuild, I'll be here. I want to be the man our daughter can look up to." It wasn't enough to erase the past, but it was enough to get Aurora to consider a conversation. Their first meeting after the trial was not warm, but it was honest. They spoke in measured tones, sitting across from each other at a neutral cafe near the university campus. Aurora, her belly now full with life, held her chin high. She wanted to hear sincerity, not promises, not distractions, just truth. Greg explained the changes he had already begun making, cutting ties with shady investors, selling off non-essential assets, and starting therapy to understand the void that led him to sabotage his own marriage. He also proposed couples counseling, not as a stunt to win her back, but as a genuine step toward healing, whether or not they stayed together romantically. Aurora, to her surprise, found herself nodding, not because she had forgotten the pain, but because she saw someone willing to face it. She agreed to therapy, setting strict boundaries, no romance, no shared home yet, and full transparency. Together, they began sessions with Dr. Caroline Freed, a renowned therapist who specialized in post-traumatic reconciliation for couples. The therapy sessions were difficult. Some ended in tears, others in stony silence. They unpeeled years of neglect, resentment, and poor communication. Greg admitted to feeling invisible as Aurora climbed the legal ladder, while Aurora expressed the deep loneliness she endured despite her success. For the first time, they truly listened. Then, in the final week of September, Aurora went into labor. Greg rushed to the hospital, heart pounding, unsure if she would even want him there. But when he arrived at the delivery ward, Aurora reached out her hand without a word. Through 15 hours of labor, he never left her side. When their daughter Lydia Davenport Brantley was finally born, Greg cried harder than he ever had. He held the tiny newborn to his chest, whispering apologies, vows, and love. Aurora watched him, exhaustion and emotion battling behind her eyes. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning. The days that followed were quiet but transformative. Aurora temporarily moved in with her mother in Capitol Hill, craving peace. Greg visited daily. He changed diapers, sang lullabies badly but sincerely, and cooked meals while Aurora rested. The Grand Medina estate remained cold and untouched. It no longer felt like a home, more like a monument to what they had almost lost. Aurora's legal instincts never slept. She drafted a post-nuptial agreement through her firm, locking down protections for Lydia's inheritance and future security. Greg signed it immediately without a single red pen markup. That gesture more than words told Aurora he was finally serious. Weeks turned into months. Aurora returned to work part-time, juggling motherhood and litigation with her usual grace. She turned her ordeal into quiet advocacy at her firm, launching a mentorship initiative for young female lawyers dealing with personal crises. She never spoke publicly about her trial, but her actions resonated like thunder in the silent corridors of power. Greg transformed as well. He stepped down from 2 major boards and refocused Brantley Properties toward ethical development, sustainable housing, minority-owned partnerships, and transparent accounting. His name, once synonymous with scandal, began to carry a new weight: redemption. Their relationship didn't rush toward a fairy tale ending. There were nights Aurora still cried silently. Mornings Greg wondered if the damage was too deep. But they chose every day to keep trying for Lydia, for themselves, and for the family they once thought was broken beyond repair. In a quiet moment one evening, as they watched Lydia sleeping between them on the couch, Aurora said softly, "We're not who we were. That's a good thing." Greg looked at her with quiet gratitude. Then maybe we have a chance to become something better. And for the first time in a long while, Aurora didn't doubt it. Over the ensuing months, Greg and Aurora remained dedicated to building a healthier dynamic. Therapy sessions continued. Greg frequently asked how he could earn back Aurora's trust. Aurora insisted on open communication, no more secret bank accounts or hidden hotels. She also needed him to understand her pain, that while forgiveness might be possible, forgetting was not. They worked on it day by day, focusing on Lydia's well-being as a common anchor. Aurora returned to Dunham and Davenport, part-time, balancing high-profile legal work with motherhood. The lawsuit that had transfixed Seattle soon faded from the public's short memory. A new scandal, a new headline eventually took its place. But for Aurora, the lessons were indelible. Never underestimate her own strength and never ignore her instincts again. Greg changed too. He sold off certain properties to reduce stress and focus on real estate projects that aligned with more ethical, community-centered goals. Perhaps it was penance for his transgressions or simply a new perspective after nearly losing everything. While Brantley Properties remained profitable, Greg's personal ambition took a backseat to fatherhood. He discovered more fulfillment in holding Lydia than in closing a multi-million-dollar deal. Esme was a memory best left in the past. For Aurora, though, the ordeal had awakened a fierce protective spirit. She championed women's legal rights within her firm, reminding them that power need not be married to arrogance or carelessness. If a pregnant woman could stare down her husband's mistress in court and win, anything was possible. Life didn't revert to a perfect fairy tale. Bruises remained. Still, it was the story of a woman who refused to become a victim, who harnessed her legal prowess and maternal instincts to protect her family. And yes, it became a cautionary tale for those who might underestimate the resolve of a so-called scorned wife, especially one with a mind sharper than most attorneys in town. Thank you for joining us on this roller coaster tale of forbidden love, betrayal, and unshakable resolve. Aurora Davenport. Brantley's story serves as a powerful reminder that no matter how dire the circumstances, determination and truth can prevail, even in the face of humiliation and heartbreak. From secret investigations to a sensational courtroom drama, she proved that clever strategy and unwavering self-belief can dismantle the most calculating adversary. If you found yourself enthralled by this real-life inspired drama, please show your support by liking this video, sharing it with friends who appreciate true tales of grit and triumph, and subscribing to our channel for more captivating stories. Your engagement not only helps us grow, but also encourages us to continue unveiling narratives of resilience, courage, and redemption. Until next time, stay bold, stay vigilant, and remember that justice has a way of emerging, especially when you least expect it.